Good afternoon, and welcome to the Public Safety and Government Operations Committee meeting. In attendance today, we have, of course, myself, Mark Conway, chair of the committee representing the 4th District. We also have Felicia Porter representing the 10th District, member of the committee, and Odette Ramos representing the 14th District, member of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Today we're going to have a committee on a hearing on two bills. The first is going to be LO 21-0015, legislative oversight of the Baltimore City Fire Department, EMS stat and operations. And the second will be LO 23-0041, legislative oversight, Baltimore City Fire Department operations. And the first one, LO 21-0015, Baltimore City Fire Department EMS stat and EMS stat and operations, is for the purpose of requesting the fire chief to present information to the Public Safety and Government Operations Committee evaluating EMS data and operations. And that was introduced on October 4th, 2021. And the second, LO 23-0041, legislative oversight, Baltimore City Fire Department operations, for the purpose of inviting representatives from the fire department to discuss operations of the fire department, including apparatus, equipment, hiring, and safety, introduced on August 21st, 2023. So with that, I'll hand it off to the chief, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Chairman Conway, members of the committee. My name is James Wallace. I'm the chief of the Baltimore City Fire Department. As I usually do, I have brought a majority of my command staff with me, including all of my assistant chiefs except for one acting assistant chief. Along with them and behind them are deputy and battalion chief subordinates for each respective area. They are our SMEs, and they will guide us through the slide deck. Each one will individually report out to you accordingly, sir. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Acting Assistant Chief Goodwin for our apparatus and infrastructure brief.
And for just understanding, would you rather we ask questions at certain points or ask questions as they come up from the committee members?
Sir, we're prepared either way.
I love it. Yeah. I love it. Okay, great.
Yes,
we'll just, I'll allow for questions as we go along. If you have questions, folks, just let me know. Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is Jason Goodwin, Acting Assistant Chief of Support Services and Community Risk Reduction. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. This slide here, we're just going over our current apparatus that's on order and give you an update on the timelines. Taking delivery of several. The very top line, the wheeled coach, we got 4 of those medic units in. They're currently down at getting tools mounted and radios installed. The next line down with the Pierce, we took delivery of that ladder truck. That's actually in service. It's been in since about the 7th. 2 medic units went in service a couple weeks ago, Medic 16 and Medic 1. The Pierce engines came in on time. They're down in Southern Maryland having their tools mounted as well, and they should be in service within maybe a month or 2. Expecting 2 ladder trucks the end of August and the end of September. Again, they'll go down, get tools mounted, and be ready to go. And then the next engine coming in is November of 24, same process. And then the way it goes out is just, each fiscal with that extended lead time on having them built, you can see that where we're expecting additional ones to come in over the next couple years. So this next slide here is going over our vehicles on order. We wanted to highlight the green energy that we're trying to do here. So we got 8 hybrid SUVs that we placed in service already over at the Fire Prevention Bureau. And then we've ordered some fully electric vehicles. We actually have 2 F-150 Lightnings. They're gonna come in and go to our logistics facilities maintenance division. And we also ordered 5 more of the Mach-E fully electric. We're gonna put those over in fire prevention as well. I'm not really sure on the lead times on those. We haven't been given VIN numbers yet. We did take delivery of 1 F-150 Lightning. That's gonna go to OEM, as well as the 1 Ford Transit van, and that's also gonna be at our facilities maintenance. And then as they get delivered, we install radios and lights and they go back in service. So an update on our station construction and renovation.
Can I ask a question about
Sure.
apparatus? I know this is a big issue that we tried to address in last year's budget, and we got a lot of money toward that. I'm glad to see that some of these vehicles are starting to come in. Do we know if I know previously we were having issues where we literally could not, we had the staff, but not the vehicles. Are we still seeing that happen? If so, how often?
So we do still see that happen intermittently. We have numerous processes with regard to repair of vehicles, right? We can do it locally at Fleet through DGS, but oftentimes we also have to resort to vendors, and we have vendors in different areas. I can tell you, once we go outside to a vendor, we, as other jurisdictions fall into line. And so we don't have an angle or an edge to be able to expedite any type of repairs. I don't think we see it as chronically as what we've had in the past. However, as we move into summer months and the call volume increases, I can expect to report out in coming months that we're seeing a frequency there. The last thing I'll say is, with regard to these timelines, they vary, as I've reported before, on supply chain and supply availability. We know for a fact right now that rear axles for large trucks are a problem, and that's a problem that's systemic.
And with that in mind, we also know that our vehicles are still having issues. They get old, they break down, and so with the attrition of our current fleet, knowing that we're still bringing in new vehicles, I can't remember from the budget if we had plans to bring in new vehicles or not, and are we preparing ourselves to account for that deficit that we'd gotten into last year, really during the pandemic? Yeah.
So we are going to place an order this year. We're having a little contract issues through DGS. We do have a little bit of a shortfall, but we're going to try to stay within that 4, 2, and 8, which is our bare minimum that we need to order to maintain that 10-year heavy apparatus, 3-year medic unit cycle, so we don't get into this deficit in the future.
Got it. And we're still seeing difficulty finding new apparatus. I remember that was an issue when we put in the order for a lot of these vehicles. There just weren't many new vehicles, and we had to.
Yeah, and yes, to answer your question directly, and I think that is reflected by the brand of apparatus. You see multiple brands there, where we had historically focused on one particular manufacturer. Given the challenges that they have across the entire, manufacturing world, if you will, we're now jumping to other ones in an attempt to just get things in quicker. And that's not limited to fire apparatus. That is very much reflected in this sheet with EMS apparatus as well. So we're gaming it to wherever we can with whatever manufacturer can get us a product timely.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you. Any questions? Please continue.
So on this slide, I just was going to give you guys an update on some of the current station construction renovation projects we're working. These in particular, we were given the $10 million grant from the state to rebuild engine 14 over on Holland Street, and then engine 27 over on Minnesota. 14 engine is in the design phase. It's pretty much completed. We're awaiting the access to the funding. Sent in some requests to Senator Hayes' office. We're hoping to have an answer within the next few weeks on that. And then it's going to still have to go to CHAP review. Engine 27, that's in the design phase. We are scheduled to have the final review by CHAP on August the 30th, and then we'll know what direction we're going from there. The engine 31, where we got the $500,000 state grant on that, City Board of Estimates accepted that on June the 5th. So that is now going to the State Board of Public Works. Actually, this morning I got an update. We didn't get the 717. We're looking at 911. So then once we get that through there, we should be able to start that construction project right behind it. If you want to go to the next one. So this batch of station renovations here is funded by the ESPP fund, and that was a $25 million pot that we had, and what we're going to use that for is basically lead paint and asbestos abatements, individual sleeping quarters, gender-neutral restrooms, cancer reduction programs, as well as green energy improvements. Engine 2 is the one that we started off with on that. That's down on Light Street. We're 90% complete. They're laying floor in there today. top down. We're on the first floor, laying floors. I'm hoping to be in there mid-August. End of August at the latest. So that's coming together really nicely. 52 engine up on Woodbrook. We're in the design phase on that one as well.
Councilwoman Porter, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. I did have a question about kitchen renovations. Is that within the $25 million that you're talking about?
So in particular with engine 2, that's a complete gut.
Okay.
We took that down to the brick walls, all new plumbing, all new electric, kitchens involved, roof. It's kind of station dependent. Some of them, like 58 down on Annapolis, we didn't have to do that kitchen because it was recently redone. So I guess it's going to be dependent on, the location.
And the reason why I bring that up is because visiting our firehouses, particularly in my district, they've pulled together money to renovate their kitchens for their furniture. And so I'm wondering if we can at least carve out some sort of renovation fund so that if they do need kitchen renovations, if they do need bathroom renovations, we have that type of, and I see you have bathrooms here, so that's why I'm just raising the kitchens as well.
And then this is just a slide to show you like where we planned on doing more with this ESPP total renovations in some of these. 55 won't be a complete gut. Neither will 29, because we've done some soft improvements in them over the years. So like I said, each one's kind of individually going to be unique, if that makes sense, but we definitely will hit kitchens if needed. So then we also were just recently awarded ARPA funding to do some facility projects. We're kicking that off within the next couple of weeks. We're going to hit 44 engine up and rolling. That's our worst bathroom in the entire fire department. That's why we chose to go there first. We have one working restroom in that entire station for an engine and a medic unit. We're going to follow that with engine 45. Generators is another portion of that, and we're going to start with engine 46. Their generator's failing. It's only powering half the station, so we're going to go ahead and just pull that one, put a new one in. We're going to follow that with 31 engines, going to finally get one, 45 and 53. The Fire Academy boiler removal, what that is they have 2 boilers that are no longer in service. They're filled with lead and asbestos. We're going to remove those to open up those rooms. And then the plan is to add some more restrooms in there in the long run. And then several roof replacements are going to be run by DGS, and we're starting with 13 engine on that one over on McMecken. And then we're just going to follow them all up. 42 engine up on Harford, 35 engine down in Brooklyn, the hazmat station, and then 43 up top, or what's planned there.
Good afternoon, John Cashin, Acting Deputy Chief of IT and Communications. The slide here is showing Q3 FY24 for our dispatch, specifically fire dispatch processes. Within Q3, we had approximately a 5% decrease in total units dispatched from Q2 and an increase of 1% processing time. Down to Q4, we had approximately an 8% increase in total units dispatched with 49,820 calls dispatched at that time. There was a 2.5% decrease in the call dispatch processing time within 64 seconds. Everything else was comparable to Q3. We are sitting with 8 vacancies currently at fire dispatch, and we just started a class today with 8 potential new hires.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tania Reddick. I am the 911 Director for the City of Baltimore. And as of right now, the 911 Emergency Call Center for Q3, we had a total of 309,696 calls that came into the 911 center. For Q4, 362,074 calls, which give us a total of 671,770 calls. And as of right now, we're answering the calls within 15 seconds at 81%. So far, we've hired 13 candidates. 14 accepted the offer letter for the July the 8th start date, but on July the 8th, 13 showed up. So we still have 7 candidates that are still in the final stages of the hiring process, and we're looking to bring them on within the next month or so. Also, that's not on this slide, we have 5 5 911 specialists that are fluent in non-English languages, including Spanish, French, and Mandarin. As far as technology, I already reported that we we switched over to our new ESI net that was in May of this year. So right now we're beta testing an AI-generated real-time transcription through a software called Prepared Live that also gives us video, pictures, platform. And Dr. Lorna is going to probably speak on this a little later. We received the 2024 NACO Achievement Award for the Behavioral Crisis Program. Thank you.
Quick question, how many vacancies do we have?
How many vacancies do I currently have?
Yes.
With the 13, I'm now down to, I want to say a total of 8 or 9, and I'm looking to overfill on
So,
those.
eight vacancies out of how many, folks in the, 911 center?
How many?
Yeah.
Total?
Yeah.
I have a total of roughly like 71 right now, 71, 72 right now.
71 right now, plus 8 if you were fully staffed. Got it.
Yes, it'll push me up to like almost 80.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Porter?
Thank you. Yes, sir. American Sign Language for the deaf and hard of hearing.
So ASL, I have that provided through Convey 911, which is my, the text message service that I use for language translation. So they also provide us with ASL, so we can do a video conference with that.
Okay.
And then we also use the third party, which is the RTT, where they can call in. If they can't speak, they can actually type. So we do have the text to 911, but then we
Okay.
also have the RTT services as well.
Okay, and has that been widely shared with the deaf and hard of hearing community?
It has, as far as text to 911.
Yep.
That was a big campaign in 2020, but we always let people know that we are available for text message as well as the Convey. We haven't really pushed that a lot, but we need to let them know that we can do the video conference with the ASL translation.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ramos?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sure you're going to anticipate my question. A few weeks ago, we had the budget hearings where you had reported that so far we have 2 Spanish-speaking 911 and you are still hiring. Has that changed? Hopefully a bit more?
Yes, we are still hiring. That was the budget hearing. At that point, we did not have the candidates in, but we was doing the open hiring. And since then, like I said, we offered the 14 offer letters. 13 has came in, and we still have 7 pending in the back.
And how many Spanish speakers?
In that class, no one speaks Spanish, but like I said, on the floor, I have a total of 5 that speaks between Spanish, French, and Mandarin.
Oh, you do have 5? Okay.
I have
thought
5.
for-
They speak between Spanish, French, and Mandarin. Yeah.
Oh, okay, because I think during the budget hearing, maybe I heard incorrectly, because it all gets mixed up. I thought it was just 2, but you're saying 5.
Yeah, it's
Well,
5.
I guess the 5 is including the other languages that you're suggesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
When I did the poll, at least 2 are speaking Spanish. Well, 3 speak Spanish, 1 speaks French, and 1 speaks Mandarin.
Got it, okay. Thanks a lot.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Afternoon, Dante Stewart, Assistant Chief of Operations. And I want to start off with our daily operations, daily activities for operations. So we start off the week with Sunday, we do battalion level training as well as pumping and driving, where the members go out, the newer members, they'll get taught how to properly pump and actually drive ladder trucks, ladder placement, things like that. On the battalion level side, these are going to be evolutions as far as fireground operations where multiple units are training together. For Mondays, we conduct hydrant inspections. We have it where the company commander sets a policy to where every single fire hydrant in the city is inspected at least twice a year. Sometimes we'll get 3 to 4 inspections per year, and with those inspections, we identify those hydrants that have issues such as missing hydrant caps, hydrants that have been completely shared off by an accident, low water pressure, and things like that. We'll send the electronic notification to the water department. They'll follow up, let us know that the hydrant's placed back in service. So that's one way that we are made aware of the operational status of the hydrant as well as where the hydrant is located prior to an incident. Tuesdays and Thursdays, we conduct building inspections. We do 1 inspection per day. So that way we can get a quality inspection as opposed to just going out and just knocking on building doors. Any violations noted, they will be documented and forwarded to Fire Prevention and Department of Housing and Department of Co-Development. Wednesday we do our Codex surveys in areas where we identify those locations that are pretty much extremely dangerous to function in from not only our standpoint, but from the public standpoint as well. And we also do target enforcement zone surveys where we work hand in hand with DHCD and go out and inspect locations that are known to have unsafe structures and work in getting those issues addressed, such as locations that need boarding to secure vacant dwellings and debris and tree removal, vacant, abandoned cars, issues like that. Fridays are makeup days, where whatever we don't get completed earlier during the week, we'll do it on a Friday. And Saturdays, we conduct neighborhood sweeps where we go out and knock on doors and make sure everybody have working smoke alarms and just do a quick fire prevention chat with the citizens. Next slide. All right, so we have the dashboard showing all of the information from quarter 3. And during quarter 3, we had 67 distinct companies that went out and conducted a total of 14,647 inspections at 13,476 addresses. From those, the following were recorded. We identified 469 Codex locations where we installed 471 placards to identify them as such. We also identified 846 vacant locations, and of those, 568 were considered unsafe, and also 140 of those were considered unsecured, meaning they were missing plywood to board them up. As far as smoke alarms, we've inspected 11,135 smoke alarms, and we installed 1,169.
A quick question.
Yes.
When we come across a vacant location, I see we have vacant addresses, we have unsafe addresses. I'm assuming those are also vacant.
Yes, it's a vacant. It's basically, you'll see the two different codes because when we initially tried this, we tried to change the verbiage from the Codex, and so the two just wouldn't, I guess, mesh well together. So that's why we had the two separate categories.
Sure. Do we, are all the vacant addresses, or at least all of the unsafe addresses considered, do they have VBNs on them, or do we at all check to see if those buildings have VBNs on them? Vacant building notices, excuse me.
Yes, so once we identify it, we'll put it in 311, and that way housing gets it, that way they can verify the status of it. Also, we have taught our members to use CodeMap, DHCD's CodeMap, so that way they don't have to wait for a follow, they can look it up themselves and identify whether the location is a legit vacant or one problem we've come across is houses being occupied that are still vacant.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, there's a lot of that. Councilwoman Porter? We can't hear you.
Thank you. I had a quick question related to
Hold on 1 second. Councilwoman, it seems like we're having issues with the stream. We're just going to pause for a second, see if we can fix that.
Cool.
Let's see if Randy knows. The Charm TV live stream is not working. Is Randy in the back?
We're just going to recess for 2 minutes so we can figure out how to get this stream back up.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna bring it back. Thank you, Councilman Ramos, for bringing that to our attention. So, my understanding is that this is still streaming via Charm TV, but we're having some issues streaming online. For those that maybe want to see this later on, if there are people watching this, probably not, but it will be available on YouTube, and so folks, if you want to review there. We're gonna get back to Councilwoman Porter, who had a question.
Thank you. What do you mean people aren't watching this? I watch all the hearings. Sorry. So had two questions related to the codex addresses. One of the major issues that we're exhibiting in the city is demolition or demolition clause related to those codex addresses. What is the process, or how are you all prioritizing that demolition list in relation to those codex addresses?
Thank you for your question, ma'am. We've recently just have it to where housing will send us the demolition list, and actually it'll have on there the status of the demolition itself. It was explained to me how if a location is slated for demolition, housing would notify the owner and give the owner an opportunity to make the necessary, I guess, repairs or adjustments to prevent the demolition, and it's held up. So we have it to where once the location is demoed, housing is going to follow up with us, let us know it has taken place. But for the most part, the owner is given an opportunity to try to remedy the situation to prevent demolition.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a formal request, please. How many homes were demolished in the last year from the city, within the city of Baltimore?
All right, we got that request, and we'll make sure to get it back. Do we, you want a timeline on when we expect to see that back?
Yeah, if it can be within the next month, that'll be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we'll proceed.
Okay, so for the numbers for Q4, we inspected 16,049, conducted 16,049 inspections at 15,117 addresses. And the vacant numbers for that quarter was 948 addresses identified, 469 were Code X locations with the installation of 475 placards, 530 unsafe locations identified, and 121 unsecured locations. In regards to smoke alarms, we inspected 10,242 and installed 1,374 smoke alarms.
Just want to acknowledge Councilman Cohen who's walked in.
So next slide, we have the Q3 and Q4 suppression unit call volume. As you can see, EMS makes up 75 to 80% of the call volume for our suppression units. But we have the monthly totals, 11,000 for January, 9,000 for February, 10,000 for March, 10,000 for April, 11,000 for May, and almost 12,000 for June. This is in relation to the change of season with the summer months coming along. Of course, the call volume's going to start picking up because everybody decides they want to hang outside now. Next slide. So this next slide is the fire incidents for Q3 and Q4. For actual structure fires, we had 132 single alarm fires in Q3 versus 130 in Q4. Of those incidents, 12 of them escalated to a working fire in 2003 and Q3, and 30 went to working fires in Q4.
Can you explain what a working fire is?
So working fire is basically any incident where the single alarm, all hands are working and we call for extra resources. That can be an additional engine and truck, sometimes for standby, sometimes for manpower, depending on the weather, or if they just anticipate the alarm escalating, well, the incident escalating. So for For the AI fire disposition, that could be anything from your outlets, microwave appliance on fire. So we had 6, 8 in quarter 3, 7 in quarter 4. Second alarms is, of course, the incidents escalating. We have 5 second alarms in quarter 3 versus 3 in quarter 4. And we've only had 1 third alarm fire in quarter 4. Next slide. Again, this slide represents our response time in minutes per month. And as you can see, the EMS versus suppression-related calls are basically consistent with each other, and they are kind of in the same range. So this next slide represents the average response times for quarter 4. As you can see, the higher range is in the 4 to 6 minute range. And as we go along the graph, the longer times are represented. Sometimes a unit forget to place at scene, or sometimes there are times where units are running all over the city due to the call volume. So that would explain the longer delays. And for quarter 4 is pretty consistent with quarter 3. And same thing with the EMS responses. They're pretty consistent with what's been shown already. Next.
I'm curious because we don't have this data, but how do we compare to other cities of a similar size in response time?
So this pretty much the same. The NFPA standard has a response time of 480 seconds, which equates to 6 minutes from time of dispatch to time on scene.
Okay.
So we're pretty consistent with the NFPA standards.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so turnout time is basically the time a unit was dispatched for a suppression-related call. And as you can see, our units respond in the 20 to 60 second range for majority of their calls. And this is the quarter 3 numbers. And quarter 4 is still consistent with quarter 3. So the next slide is going to be the turnout time to actual fires. And again, as you can see, our numbers are still in the 20 to 40 second range for units responding to reported dwelling fires. This is quarter 3 number, and quarter 4 is still consistent with quarter 3. And the biggie. So this is going to be the suppression unit. Okay. So this is going to be the fire incidents per city council district. So I'm going to go with the 5 busiest or 5 highest totals. So for quarter 3, the 9th district had a total of 35 structure fires. 7th district had 21 structure fires. 10th district had 20 structure fires. 12th district had 17, and the 5th highest was the 8th district with 14 total fires. We've identified Codex locations in those, and we've only had, for the whole city, we had a total of 6 Codexes, with 3 being in the 9th in the top slot, 1 in the 7th, and 1 in the 10th in the top slot. For quarter 4, again, it's 9th district with 27 total fires, 7th district with 22 total fires, 10th district with 18, 8th district with 17, and there was a 3-way tie for 5th, with the 12th having 14 total fires, the 11th having 14 total fires, and the 6th district having 14 total fires. All in all, at the end of the both quarters, we had a total of plus 12 difference in total fires from quarter 3 to quarter 4, plus 5 on the number of occupied dwelling fires from quarter 3 to quarter 4. We actually went down 3 in unoccupied dwellings from quarter 3 to quarter 4, down 4 in vacant dwelling fires from quarter 3 to quarter 4. Actually went down 2 Codex locations that had fires from 3 to 4. And on the undetermined structures, those could be labeled as garages, sheds, anything adjacent to a dwelling. So we actually had a 22, we actually went and increased 22 of those.
I'm curious, this is, it's interesting to see it this way. I'm curious, do we know, like, I'm not even sure exactly what my question is here, but it's interesting to see it broken down by district and then sort of type occupied, unoccupied, vacant, and otherwise. But I'm curious if there are other characteristics of homes or other characteristics of neighborhoods that lend themselves to more fire incidents. Because my thought here is that probably the most densely populated parts of the city are not necessarily where we're seeing the fires, which you would imagine more people, more fires, but that's not what we're seeing here. I do think there's some correlation with the vacants, but it's just really interesting to see when you have it on a map and broken down in this way. So I'm not sure if we've done that sort of analysis to see where we might want to do either targeted outreach or proactive work in that way based on what we know about the likelihood of a fire given certain characteristics of previous fires.
Yeah, and I guess kind of on a micro level, we report out bi-weekly in FireStat.
Yeah.
And we look at things through the lens of TEZ, Target Enforcement Zones. Mm-hmm. And that's where we study the trends, deeper. And then we take these maps and we use other study data and we do overlays. And quite often we see the same areas that have recurring problems. The one particular TEZ area that's in District 9 is reflective of, several things that we're working through right now with multiple city agencies. I would agree this, it's an interesting way to do it, and we can certainly take the data and use different bases for different, outcomes. Mm-hmm. I think right now this was just the easiest way for us to be able to do it and just show statistics, but we can also bring different data in if you want to show comparisons to other things that we look at as well.
Yeah, I think this is actually, this is actually quite helpful, just in sort of jogging my imagination on what we might think are the reasons why we have fires in certain neighborhoods or certain types of neighborhoods, and what the realities are. And this kind of puts it out in no uncertain terms, like this is what we see. And I'm curious if we had other variables that we're looking at. I'm just not sure. We have our theories, I'm sure. You guys are firefighters. You probably have your theories on where we might expect to see more fires. But yeah, it's just really interesting. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
I have a question.
Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On that, these slides as well, can you remind me how you're classifying unoccupied? So there's vacant, meaning it's on code map as vacant. There's your Codex, which is your own decision, which doesn't necessarily mean it's the same as code map just because you haven't surveyed the whole city. And then there's the unoccupied. So that's just a house that looks decent. It's just that nobody's in there. So it could be that somebody's changing out in terms of like, there isn't somebody left rental and is now there's gonna be one moving in, but we also have a significant amount of properties where they are empty but still don't qualify for a VBN because they're not dilapidated. So I'm just trying to understand what the definition that y'all are using for unoccupied here.
Thank you, ma'am. The unoccupied is basically probably a dwelling that somebody recently just moved out of, or it could be one that nobody's really sure of the status of it. We've had fire a couple weeks ago that was listed as occupied, and the neighbors stated to us, once the members got on scene, They just moved out last week. So we come across that a lot, and,
Gotcha.
yes.
So it's not that you get there and there's nobody in there because they just went to dinner and, their house caught on fire. It's really about the fact that they just,
Yeah, so.
there's nobody living there.
Right, correct. But we'll definitely, we'll follow up with you on that, because it could also mean that it was an occupied house, nobody was there at the time. So we do have that as well.
I mean, I've been with you at some fires in my district where the homeowners did come afterwards. And so they weren't there, thank God, at the time, because then they were safe, but they did come afterwards. But that wouldn't be considered as unoccupied.
True. So, but.
That's what I'm asking. Would it be
Yeah,
considered?
So we're gonna follow up on it.
Oh, okay, so we'll,
For
yeah, 'cause-
clarification on the
Yeah.
unoccupied aspect of it.
yeah, because the reason I'm asking is because I still contend that there are, we've been talking a lot about vacant properties, and I'm glad we have all this data, which really helps us. I know that there are a lot more properties where nobody's living in them, nobody's coming to rent, nobody's, I have several in my district, 1818 Chilton Street is one of them. And so, but they're not qualifying for BBN because they're not dilapidated. And so I'm trying to understand as my colleague was talking about, I'm trying to understand the burden that, we understand the burden that the vacant properties are having on our fire, just from these, Q4 is 21% of the fires were vacant or codex. And in Q3, 27% of the fires were vacant or codex. And if the unoccupieds were just empty because nobody's living in them at all, then that adds to the vacancy burden. Do you know what I'm saying? That's what I'm trying to get at. So I can follow up with you online after that. But this is pretty significant that, in Q3, 27% of the fires were in vacant or codex properties, which tells us a lot about, the burden that it takes on the city, basically. So thank you.
Please use your microphone.
My apologies.
Okay.
Did you all hear the numbers, or do you need me to repeat them?
Yeah. you
Okay.
said again, yeah.
So top 5 busiest districts as far as total responses, and this includes suppression and EMS responses for the suppression units. It's going to be the 11th district with 5,030 total responses, 12th district with 3,814 total responses, 10th district 3,599 total responses, 9th district with 3,349 total responses, and 7th district with 3,249 total responses. Altogether for Q3, we had a total of 38,760 total responses, with 14,889 of those being suppression-related responses and 23,871 being EMS-related responses. The Q4 numbers, the 11th district had 5,800 total responses for this quarter. 12th district was 4,357. 9th district was 3,691. The 10th district, 3,610. And 7th district, 3,518 total responses. For Q4, we had a total of 42,157,000 responses, with 14,000 those being 14,640 of those being suppression-related responses, and 27,517. So breakdown between quarter 3 and quarter 4, you had a increase of 3,397 responses, total responses. We had a decrease of 249 suppression-related responses. However, there was an increase of 3,646 EMS responses, and we can attribute that to the change of weather with the summer months coming on.
Good afternoon. I'm Deputy Chief Sean Ames from the Office of the Fire Marshal. The Office of the Fire Marshal's core duties and responsibilities are listed on the slide in those bulleted items. Our activities for quarter 3 of fiscal year 24 are as follows. We performed 4,705 fire inspections, 240 plan reviews, 22 fire safety talks and fire drills, and 118 fire investigations. In quarter 4 of FY24, we performed 5,465 inspections, 382 plan reviews, 32 fire safety talks and fire drills, and 104 fire investigations. Our totals for quarter 3 and 4 combined are 11,170 fire inspections, 622 plan reviews, 54 fire safety talks and fire drills, and a total of 222 fire investigations.
Deputy Chief, we talked a little bit about this during the brief interlude we had. One of the concerns or questions that I keep getting from folks or hearing from folks is issues with water pressure and getting their use and occupancy permit despite water pressure issues. Can you tell me a little bit about what's going on there, what we expect from folks, what role DPW has in that, how DPW rectifies, and our timeline to address those issues?
Yes, sir, Councilperson. There's been numerous meetings. As you know, Baltimore has an antiquated water system, several hundred years old. There's numerous places that doesn't have the gallonage or flow. The requirements for a fire suppression system are contained in the IBC, which is the International Building Code, IFC, International Fire Code, and an NFPA 13. We've adopted all those codes as part of the 2021 Baltimore City Building and Fire-related codes. The IBC clarifies what type of businesses need to have a certain type of fire protection system, as well as the IFC. The way that that system is designed and implemented is contained in NFPA 13. The Fire Marshal really doesn't have any leeway with determining what can and cannot. It's in the code, and it's up to DPW to maintain those water lines, to fix them, repair them, and reline them so that that particular business or address can have the adequate flow and water pressure. A lot of times it's a valve being closed. It's not actually the water pressure because DPW is constantly working on different mains. So we've had probably 30 projects in the past year where the pressure was good, the flow was good. They just had a valve turned up, but there are areas of the system, particularly in the West Pratt Street area, they have no pressure or flow. To be full disclosure, you would have to do some type of legal amendment to let people get a use and occupancy without having the fire protection system as mandated by code. We're bound by code. It would have to be some type of legal, amendment to let that person or those businesses operate without the proper systems.
That's helpful to know. And so that's really helpful to know. You said the IBC, IFC, and NFPA 13.
Yes, and all those codes are part of the Baltimore City Building and Fire-related
Right. We adopt those.
Yes, by that we adopted all those codes.
Got it. And so these are all sort of fire safety codes, just making
Yes.
sure that there's a proper sprinkler system, all that good stuff.
Yes, sir.
And when we come across these issues, how are they rectified? Like, I'm guessing we call DPW out, they check the water pressure, and they say, look, you have to replace this whole line, it's, rusted out or whatever. I'm not sure what the problems are that we typically see that cause lack of flow.
As I further alluded, a lot of the majority of the problems is not the actual flow or pressure. There's a valve closed somewhere. So that's the majority, but we do have some areas that's not the issue. They literally don't have enough pressure or flow, and those are the ones that are being held up as we speaking to. DPW does whatever they need to do, and they have relined several mains, but it takes time, and that's the issue.
And when you say it's often due to valve closures, these are on the property owner side or on the city side?
No, actually, the actual city side. As
I
they
see.
do work, they shut valves, they close valves to work here to, to have the water cut off in different places.
And then when instances arise where DPW has to reline, a pipe or something like that, how long does that typically take?
I've seen DPW jump to action in several weeks, and then there are other instances where it's ongoing and they haven't addressed it. So it really, just depends on their budget or their, issues they have going on.
Okay, I'll have to follow up with DPW a little more on their process on this. Please go ahead, Councilman Ramos. Porter, after you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the case of a business in my district, the DPW has tested the pipes and says there should be flow. And so, I've had to intervene on this and try to get them to dig to try to figure out what's going on. And luckily, your office has worked with this particular business to come up with a temporary solution to the issue. But they're going to have to, be able to get that flow and to be able to move forward. So, I want to just make sure that you're still able to work with businesses to at least come up with a temporary situation so that they can get opened and, try to, which is what we've done in this particular instance, but hopefully we can get this going. So I guess I wonder what, so you just kind of hope that the DPW is going to do this work and work with us on trying to get them to do it, but then you're also, thank goodness, getting these agreements in place just so that we can get our businesses open. Just want to make sure you're still in.
Yes, so we work with
there.
businesses on a case-by-case basis to develop, a solution where they can still operate. But there are some cases where we can't grant it because that's what they need to operate. But with Red Ammons, I guess we have worked with them to develop, a plan, a solution for them to actually operate. I don't think this is in your district, but 2401 Greenmount Avenue, which
Just
is
south of my district.
It's a church. They had low water pressure, and it was a valve. They opened the valve, boom, they could open and operate. So they have apartments on the second and third floor, which could not occupy. As soon as they fixed the water issues, they were able to occupy the apartments. So again, we will work with each business on a case-by-case basis to develop some type of solution for them. Yes.
You're saying you can partially issue a UNO, like for
It
part of the building?
depends. It depends. It may be the first floor only.
Got it.
It'd be, it can't be an apartment. It can't be a dwelling unit. But
Got
if it's
it.
a supermarket or a bar or something, we can let them operate. But a residential unit must have the proper fire protection.
Got it, that helps to know.
Or that they can limit the occupancy of the space so that there's not as many people. And I'm glad that there's some flexibility. Let me just say, I want everybody to be safe, no question, and that's your ultimate goal.
Yes.
So we want to make that happen, but I think helping to at least come up with some short-term solutions, but ultimately we've got to figure this out with DPW about the flow. That would be great. Thank you.
All right. Porter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have a quick question as a follow-up from our budget hearings related to the number of fire marshals that we have throughout the city. Given the primary functions that you have, this is a large portfolio. Chief, this question is directly related to you. Are we seeing any type of hiring effort for fire marshals? Are we expanding in a way? How are we kind of allocating for the small number of fire marshals that we do have that corresponds with the primary functions that they're supposed to do throughout the entire city?
And thank you for that question. So in the very near future, we're actually going to reorganize the fire marshal's office a little bit. We are going to assess where our technical expertise lies, and we're going to apply certain levels of expertise to certain functions that the office fulfills. The other thing that we're doing right now, we've had out for a while, posting for plans reviewers and things like that. It's hard for us to remain competitive in that world based on what we ask. We ask for certain degrees, fire engineering and things like that. We have to bring that pay scale up to be conducive with the college degrees that we're demanding one has to be able to come in there. But overall, in addition to the staffing that's there now, the restructuring I'm about to do, we are also looking at reclassifying some existing positions in the department right now that we know we're not going to fill to civilian positions. So, and I'll touch on that in future slides here, but expansion there beyond reorganization, I'm looking more civilianization than what I am uniformed at this point. So in a nutshell, it's very much a work in progress.
One more quick question, Chief Ames. So when talking to folks, I often hear that this is like the last thing that they would need in order to get the UNO. Is that a matter of we get it last, or is there a world in which we could identify this problem early and begin working on it at the beginning of the sort of evaluation process for the UNO?
So I review most of the larger plans I review all the plans for new buildings. So part of my comment is to provide a DPW fire flow, like at the start. So a lot of the new projects, we know immediately if there's an issue. It's the existing projects, such as a Red Emma, that they don't have to provide that, and they find out as the process goes along. So we're doing our best to, get ahead of the curve.
So like larger buildings is
yes, no, absolutely.
We would know.
Yes.
But the smaller ones, this kind of comes at the tail
So
end.
anything new we would know. Maybe the existing ones we would not know as
Got
they
it.
change and do different things.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You can continue. Yes.
John Boblitz, Acting Deputy Chief, Safety and Risk Management. We're looking at our fire ground injuries for the last 3 quarters. The slide represents the 3 quarters. The next couple slides, we break it down into each quarter. So if we want to go to the second quarter. Second quarter, you can see we had 3 injuries in the vacant dwellings. All 3 of those injuries were overexertions, which basically we classify as a slip, trip, fall type of injury. The second one was our undetermined or other. Those could be possibly a rescue assignment where they're out on the street or we didn't get enough information to classify it. We had 3 overexertions there and 1 not otherwise classified, meaning that it could have been somebody just felt sick or something of that nature. The last section is our occupied dwellings. We had 2 burns, 4 overexertions, and 2 not otherwise specified or not otherwise classified for quarter 2. Quarter 3, we had 12 injuries total, 1 burn and 2 overexertions and vacants. We had 1 burn and 1 overexertion in an unoccupied. We had 1 overexertion in undetermined or other. In occupieds, we had 4 overexertions and 1 burn injury. And then on the code X-ray, was not otherwise classified. That particular injury, someone became dehydrated while working outside the dwelling, so they weren't actually in. Even though it's classified as a Code X, doesn't mean that we're always inside working, but the injury happened on that type of incident.
Yeah, one of the questions that I had, not necessarily for this issue, but you brought it up, is this heat.
Yes.
And the wear this having on our folks in the field. How do we keep an eye on that and just make sure that?
So, I mean, every day we talk to people about staying hydrated. The battalion chiefs, if it's an incident, it's, you know, any type of fire, they'll call for extra help because we have to rotate our manpower through because the work cycles definitely get much shorter. As everybody knows, with all that gear and stuff on, you can become dehydrated very, very quickly.
Yeah, so that's helpful to know. And I know for the EMS, EMT guys, I got that question for them too, so just get ready for it. Yeah.
And then we can move on to the fourth quarter. In the vacants, we had 2 lacerations, 3 overexertions. We had a total of 7 in occupied, 4 burns, and 3 overexertions.
I'm going to take the human resources part, but before I do, I would also add that to your question with the heat and how we deal with it, we have that Box 414 service that they volunteer their time. They come out, they prepare meals in the middle of the winter. You know, it's the best cup of coffee you'll ever have at 3 a.m. They are running day to day behind our apparatus, and they're a lot of what holds us together with regard to just being able to cool people down, keep us from having dehydration emergencies and things like that. So, you know, just want to give a shout out to them because without that team, you know, we'll survive, but we'll be in a hard place. So
Yeah,
they,
this
a lot
is
of work for
the
us.
first I've heard of. You said Box 114.
Box 414, yeah, it's a fire buff group, but they actually have the what we call canteen response vehicles. So they can come out, they can prepare meals. You see them at a lot of events. They're kind of parked off to the side, but they also run at least one Suburban, if not 2. And they just keep restocking with ice, Gatorade, water, cold towels, and I mean they're amazing. So
That's great.
You know, big shout out to them.
Yeah.
When I have a chance. Human resources. So what we did is we kind of broke out just high level numbers of where we are doing hiring right now. There's a lot of civilian hire in here. However, contained within anything that says a class are uniform personnel. So EMS class at the top, but then as we move through, it's more administrative staffing. Fiscal services got a boost back in May. We were able to hire into there. OEM continues to build out their staffing over there, whether it be at the deputy director level, section chief level, or just planners. So Director Henderson's doing a great job over there, you know, upping his staff as well. I'm very proud that we've been able to hire an HR director. She's actually in the room behind me. Nikki, if you'd raise your hand. So we just hired an HR director. We are onboarding a chief financial officer. We know that the one we have now is retiring in October, so we're onboarding one at the end of the month. We're going to double fill parallel and have a transition there, you know, as opposed to one walking out and one walking in. Again, as Director Reddit had mentioned earlier, they've been very aggressive with seeking out and recruiting 911 operators. They had 13 in the room the other day. Chief Matz and I got to go in and talk to them. They were very excited. You know, to her credit, we actually recruited people out of 2 counties that touch the city. So I was real happy to see that. We actually had operators. They're coming to us now. So, you know, and I think that's huge. And that speaks to the work that's being done with regard to recruitment. Fire dispatch as well. There are 8 candidates right now that are, they're being pre-screened. Fire dispatch is also very much on the front burner for us. There's a tentative start date to later this week. I think we're on track. I'll follow up with HR, but I believe we're on track at this point. In addition to what Director Reddit has onboarded, she's got more in the pipeline. So the goal there is to fill the vacant spots, but to also have overlap in there as well. We know that during shift change and things like that, we could occasionally find an empty seat, so we want to absorb that with some overlap. There are, Chief Shiloh will touch on some of her academy classes that are about to graduate in the near future. However, our HR division right now is working to seat at least 60 candidates for the next class. I'm hoping that number's a little bit higher, but we're gonna kind of count on 60. That class should begin on or about September 11th of this year. And then OEM, the last bullet that interviews were held, we did promote into that spot. So we're seeing now people starting to onboard. I think that with the acquisition of an HR director, we really have fresh eyes on what we're doing. And, there's different perspectives now to how we can be better. And then again, PIO, we're in the final stages of interviews for PIO. We should know by Friday who our candidate will be for appointment to PIO. So I'm very happy with the work they've done. These numbers are reflective. They're putting in a lot of time.
Great to hear. Welcome to the team.
Yeah, and then the final couple pages, the fiscal officer for OEM, our battalion chief EMS test is coming up. PIO and ESIs, so our emergency service instructors, we're up to, I believe, 2 now that are civilian out there. So they're going to be, Chief Shiloh's shop at the academy is going to be another area where we're going to look to bring in civilians to help augment the team that she has out there as well. And then the final 2 slides, school career days, they were very active throughout the month of May with the different school visits, as well as a lot of the recruitment fairs that were held over at War Memorial. I was in there both times they were in. I would consider those to have been very successful. And then the final piece is YouthWorks. We do have a considerable amount of youth in the program right now, not only at the Fire Academy, but we've got 2 embedded in the Fire Marshal's office as well as 2 embedded in the 911 center.
Quick question before we move to the Fire Academy, my favorite part of the presentation. How many vacancies do we have for EMT firefighters?
I'll get that to you immediately after this. I literally asked as we were walking in that we didn't have this. I noticed it, and I knew you were going to want it, so we will get that to you.
Okay, thank you.
Directly following this.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. This first slide represents what we currently have as recruit training out at the Fire Academy. We currently have 2 classes. EMT Firefighter Recruit 2401, which is broken down into 2 subsections, and that's based on whether or not they come in with an EMS certification. We had 21 people who came in with their EMT. And that takes maybe 3.5 months to complete that course. So we separate them out. We started with 61 total. We're down to 47. We have an EMS recruit class in there. It started with 19. 2 of those were actually members who had resigned, who were coming back in. So we excluded them pretty much from the numbers. They were re-entered. We're down to 8 with them, 1 paramedic, 7 EMTs. We had an incumbent class, which are members that were already currently within the EMS system who wanted to come over to the fire suppression side. We had 10 members, put them through their training, and all 10 are in the field currently. We're going to bring them back and have a joint graduation with 2401A. That's scheduled for August the 9th. The next slide just outlines the operational training that we do every day with the field units. We have been putting some on hold because of the heat, and we're redeveloping some of the classes so that they're not redundant. We usually do that once a year. So on Thursdays, we're developing an engine operation class, so that's new to the field, and they should start back in the fall. The next couple of slides are just high priority trainings that have been identified through major incidents that we've been focusing on a little bit more with incident command, rapid intervention team training, and more work with the thermal imaging cameras. And we've incorporated that into the recruit training for a whole solid day with those cameras. The next page, these are all newly developed classes that we have put in for grants. So most of that's grant funded. One thing that we did implement about a year ago that has finally started to be delivered is human performance training, which is something that we really have not focused on in the past. And it puts officers through how to handle high stress incidents, how to manage them better. And that's a week-long class, and it's delivered by an outside vendor, Leadership Under Fire. And we've gotten one class through, and it's been pretty highly successful. We've gotten a lot of really good feedback from that. The next slide just goes through other operational things that we're responsible for. The hose testing we do twice a year. We do it in the spring and the fall. We have on-demand, like defensive driving. When people's permits expire, we'll do them pretty much on a daily basis as requested. Return to duty evaluations, we do those. Approvals, any companies who are requesting some additional little training, they'll come out and we'll work with them when that's requested as well. And then last one are structured classes that we offer. These standard course offerings are prerequisites for promotional exams. So every other year we will offer those. And then the other ones, the fire instructor 2 is required to be an adjunct instructor or to be an instructor. The safety officer class, we've put on 4 to 5 of those. That was grant funded. We have Inspector 1 and 2 coming up. Next week is Inspector 1, and then the 1403 classes allow them to go into live fire scenarios as an instructor. The newly developed grant-funded classes are listed on the right. I just touched on them a little bit. The Advanced Firefighter Removal is a class that is grant-funded that teaches different techniques for trapped firefighters in different scenarios. That's a 4-day class, pretty intense. We've delivered 3 of them so far. We have grant funding for 5 more. And it's almost like selling concert tickets. As soon as we put the bulletin out, it's sold out. So everybody's pretty excited about getting into that class. The additional responsibilities on this last slide just pretty much lists most of what I've kind of already said. We are involved with the YouthWorks education. We have 17 kids out there right now that are being taught EMR, which is kind of a mini EMT class, emergency medical responder, but it is a state certified class. So we're hoping that they'll be successful. It's pretty condensed into that 5-week period for YouthWorks. And then we just finished our 5th year of running Camp Spark, which was this past weekend. It was blazing hot, and we had 51 kids between 12 and 16 years old. We kind of targeted towards women or girls. We don't turn away boys, so we had a handful of boys there as well. and they did not tap out. It was so hot, and they were out there doing it the whole time. It was pretty exciting. So we're hoping that that's kind of a long-term project that down the road, we've introduced them to something that they now know they can do, because there are a lot of girls that really don't think that they can do the job, and we just showed them that they're perfectly capable. So that's just one of my little things. That's about it.
Curious, do we have any updates on the Explorers program? I know something Burnett worked a lot on. I'm curious how that's going, how many recruits, progress through the program.
Completely honest, it's a work in progress.
Okay.
So we're working with HR. We have the new director. We have some change in personnel. Some of the outgoing personnel, there's been some issues. So it's not on the back burner by any means. We're trying really hard to make that work. This Youth Works program with the EMR is part of that. It's not as structured as we would like it to be, but we're working on it, and we're going to get it right.
Yeah. I asked that question because I sort of see that model as an opportunity to learn about what we can do to get young people from high schools into these city careers. And this is a particularly difficult one, of course, in the fire service. So you guys you're going to have challenges, and so I don't expect that not to be the case. I would, if you could, for the committee, just a brief update on what you're dealing with, some of the challenges you're experiencing, as we evaluate other apprenticeship programs and things like that. I think we want to be able to learn from your experience so far. So,
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. We can continue. Chief Matz.
So good afternoon, Chairman Conway, ladies and gentlemen of the City Council.
Chief
Sorry,
Matz, 1 second. Councilwoman Ramos.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I had a question just real quick about, during budget hearings, we had asked for detailed information. Oh, the mayor's office isn't here. This is a question for them. Yeah, I had asked, we had asked for all of the requests that the department made to the mayor's office and finance in order to address the concerns that were brought up during the Stricker Street report. And some of those have been funded, some of those have not been. And we're still waiting for that list. We don't have it. So I don't know if you have the status report on that, or if I need to wait for the mayor's office. Did you submit it to the mayor's office already?
Yeah, we prepared responses. That's our understanding. We will, my chief of
I'll
staff
follow
and
up
I will
again
get
when
that
the mayor's
answer
office
for you.
gets back, but that is a critical piece of information that this committee and the Ways and Means Committee needs to prepare for next, to start the advocacy process relative to the next budget.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll note that down as a request to the committee so that we can get that to the mayor's office.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please, Chief Matz, all yours.
It was me, wasn't he? You didn't want me to start. It's okay. Hey, as I said before, good afternoon, Chairman Conway, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having us. For the record, my name is James Matz. I'm the Assistant Chief of EMS for the Fire Department. I'm also joined by Dr. Benjamin Lawner, our Medical Director. He'll be speaking in intermittent with the slides with me as well. Thank you. What I do, like I always do, is go over the top ALS and top BLS 5 top responses for both quarters. They're very similar, quarter 3 and quarter 4. As a total, our BLS call types, the sick, unwell, vehicle accidents, abdominal injuries, and falls are the same on both quarters. On the ALS side of things, our top 3 calls that are the same on both sides of the quarters are the 6 card, which is breathing trouble. That actually accounted for 3,396 calls over the 2 quarters. Unknown problem or unknown person down is 2,221 for the 2 quarters. And then sick, not alert accounted for 2,213 calls over the 2 quarters. What we always like to do is we have active dashboards that we use. We take snapshots to tell us one of the big things. The data team that I think was great. It gives us a snapshot of where the system is, where we're at. The first of those dashboards is the EMS Community Metrics. What we report on that primarily is the most common call types, what neighborhoods in those areas are we doing the most calls for, and then they track some overdose stuff, Narcan use as well. I would say on Q3, we did have a total of 34,000 incidents. If I may, I'll just take a step back, and I always like to remind everybody, there's a unique call incident for every call. There's multiple units on an individual call. For instance, a cardiac arrest may have 4 units on it, so that's the responses are much higher than the incidents. And then, of course, transports we'll talk about a little bit later. In Q4, I would like to point out, as Chief Stewart had pointed out earlier, it's time of the year our calls are going to start to pick up. Our call incidents went up from Q3 to Q4 by 4,000 incidents. Our responses also went up by 8,000. Once again, our most common call types are the same, of course, across both quarters, which is shortness of breath, sick, or unknown. It's also important to point out that those top 4 neighborhoods are the same across board, which is downtown Seton Hill, Upton, Druid Heights, Old Town Middle East, and Sandtown Winchester remain our top areas, which you'll see marked across a lot of these different heat maps that we use. The EMS operational metrics dashboard, that really looks at our call incidents as well as our response. One of Dr. Lawner's big pushes is what is our response time to sensitive calls? In an ideal world, if you have a low acuity call like a splinter in your finger, you should wait longer. We should be getting out to those higher acuity calls faster. And that's what we look at over the course of this dashboard. Our response time, median to sensitive calls, went from 8 minutes and 53 seconds up slightly to the fourth quarter, 8 minutes and 63 minutes as our median response time. The second operational metric dashboard that we always like to report on is suppression wait time. Sometimes suppression, unfortunately, is going to have to wait for low acuity calls. Dr. Lawner and I are going to talk a little bit later about some innovative things we're doing to try to reduce those wait times. But in this case, from Q2 to Q3, the average median wait time for suppression was about 6 minutes on Q3, 6:69 on Q3, and that went up to 7:75 in Q4, which again is accounting for our busier summer times and call volumes that we're dealing with. The last 2 dashboards that I'm going to talk about before I pass it over to Dr. Lawner is our EMS operational metrics 3. That really looks at our offload time. Remember, offload time was a huge problem for us back in the pandemic. We really did some incredible inroads with that. I don't want you to think that everything's great because we still have periodic problems here and there. We just had one last week we had to deal with. But all in all, those times are dramatically dropping down. Regionally, I just got a report from the medical director from the state. Our region is it's all hospitals, all systems. We're reporting about a 43 to 44 minute offload. Baltimore City is running about 49 minutes, which is dramatically better than the 70 minutes that we were doing before.
Right. Good afternoon. As Chief Matz mentioned, Ben Lawner, privileged to serve as the medical director for Baltimore City Fire Department. And again, I just want to take the time to say, this is certainly a complex operation that goes on 24/7. We all are familiar with the challenges, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to talk about some of the mitigation strategies, because although we have a lot of challenges, certainly it does not preclude us from moving forward and looking at how we can optimize operations. So please feel free to ask any questions. The first dashboard here, this is alternative destination. I highlight this simply to show that we have used a data-driven approach. In my opinion, and the data would show that transporting somebody to a destination apart from a hospital is a very limited utility. This was also seen with the fall of ET3, meaning that once an ambulance goes to the scene of an emergency, there are very few things that we can do, and there's an overall tendency to transport to the hospital. This also highlights the challenges that we have because this slide shows that it highlights a lot of our behavioral health stabilization centers, and the patients that are in need of service have such medically complex needs. There's social determinants of health, there's housing needs, and you can see that the amount of patients that we from the fire department drop off is overshadowed by the patients that we take out. And that is not a failure of the behavioral health stabilization centers. It's reflective of the problem that I know we all understand and appreciate, which is the complex comorbidities of substance use behavioral health. So we continue to engage with our partners. Every month, from Hopkins, from Gaudenzia, from the stabilization center, and that remains just a continued opportunity. This is a comparison between Q3 and Q4. So if you look at the select mitigation strategies, one of the things, as Chief Matz mentioned, we are working very diligently to minimize offload. At some point, there has to be ownership of these challenges. And the hospitals, one of the hospitals in which I work, for example, it's very difficult. They are on the receiving end of EM overcrowding. And so we've worked with them to create hospital offload areas. We've worked with them to work with our medical duty officer to evenly distribute the load. And what you will see in both Q4 and Q3 is that these times have not only remained stable, but they are decreased from pre and intra-COVID. So this is a success story. It certainly doesn't tell everything, but is reflective of some of the positive work that we've done with our hospitals. And those hospital collaborations continue every month. This is an overview for the next.
Dr.
Yes, I'm sorry, sir.
You were going pretty quickly. That's phenomenal news. This, I think, is something I know we've been working on for as long as I've been in Baltimore. So this is a huge step. I was curious if you could just more pointedly tell me what the interventions were that we employed in order to reduce offload times.
So this is an ongoing challenge. So the interventions that we've deployed, besides really putting pressure on our friends at the hospital, engaging the state, what you'll see around areas is Sinai has opened an EMS offload area. University of Maryland has hired an EMS offload nurse. So it has really been a tireless surveillance of our resource, utilization of sort of situational awareness to ensure that we distribute our units appropriately. But to give credit where credit is due, the hospitals have really focused on providing offload areas for our personnel. This is also in no small measure due to what is called EMS offload or direct to triage, where once we select a low acuity patient, and ideally, of course, we'll talk about this, we should get this at the point of dispatch, no question. But if we define there's a low acuity patient, those patients are going to the waiting room, and that has significantly impacted in a positive way the EMS offload.
In addition, just to piggyback on what Dr. Lohner said, the state through MIMS, they also have the Health Service Cost Review Commission looking at that as a reportable metric for area hospitals as well. So it's kind of evolving as we go through, but there is significant change.
This is a broad overview of some of the mitigation strategies and is not an inclusive list. So what I will do is highlight some of these specifically. Number one is Tele 911. This is the program where fire suppression and EMS apparatus, if it is a low acuity patient that is deemed by our clinicians that does not need transport to the hospital by ambulance, they can connect with a 911, an emergency physician. We'll talk about that a little bit later. That is live. We still definitely need to push on our RN triage line. The nurse triage line is the component where the emergency care nurse will be able to hold low acuity calls and, most importantly, direct them to the most appropriate resource, whether that is a substance use response, whether that is 988. We are also working on dispatch reform. That is tied to the nurse triage line. That is where once you hear all these calls, I know Chief Matz had talked about that, if we identify a low acuity call, which is what we in emergency medical services call an alpha or a bravo call, we can basically say, let's send it to a nurse for further triage, and then that is a secondary way of saying we need to send a suppression apparatus, we need to send a behavioral health unit, so that's happening. We continue to utilize our contracted ambulance service, and finally, alternative destination, which we hope to replace as a, not a very sustainable strategy, but as the alternative destinations grow, there's a lot of discussion, which I'm sure we'll get into in terms of substance use receiving centers. We can revisit that and ensure that we have an additional option to transport our patients. But to be very clear, right now, once the ambulance comes, if you look at the law and the Code of Maryland regulations, we're really limited in where we can transport to, and that is beyond the Baltimore City Fire Department. But we hope to expand that as we work through this.
And that's state law. That's state law that governs that?
Sir?
where we can triage to?
Oh, my apologies, Mr. Chair. Yes, so there are certain destinations that are recognized as alternative facilities. Yes, so that is not only state law, EMS policy. I will say to be for the sake of clarity, once they are triaged non-emergent by dispatch, it opens up a lot more. But once the ambulance gets to the scene and determines it's low acuity, that's where it's a little bit of a challenge. So yes.
Got it, thank you.
On the front side of that, though, with the nurse triage line, we were just notified today that the financial aspect of that bid for that going forward is scheduled for August the 7th. We just got the email this morning. So it's moving, just very slow.
I'm going to talk a little bit about this briefly, and this is, I have to give credit to EMS, Fire Operations, and Deputy Chief Cullen. This is what we call a chase car pilot program, and one of the things we talk about is how we utilize resources more efficiently, and we all have talked to a great extent about the paramedic shortage. I know Chief Shiloh had addressed this, and so if we have limited advanced life support personnel, can we respond to them in a different way? And what this is going to show you in a very limited way is what we call a proof of concept. So we incepted a unit where they will self-dispatch to high acuity calls. The unit, since its inception, has gone to several hundred calls. They have reliably selected the high acuity determinants, and you can see those high acuity determinants on the top. So anything with a delta or an echo, a D or E, those are respiratory arrests or cardiac arrests. So we have now proven that we can use these units to get out of the hospital faster. We can use this unit to augment or upgrade a basic life support unit. I think the next phase of this, in conjunction with our fire department EMS leadership and operations chiefs, is integrating them into dispatch. So if you have a limited number of paramedics, I think the ideal state would be one is if you send this in lieu of a fire suppression unit, or you identify the high acuity calls, so we could make a more nuanced decision about resources. So we're very proud of the success. There are other programs that have done this. This has not been the operational response profile of Baltimore City Fire Department, but happy to report that this is a successful proof of concept and more to follow as we continue to develop this unit.
Just to piggyback on Dr. Lawner, the actual numbers for the ASU unit, they're actually up to 615 responses as of this week. And I'd like to point out that 86.2%, they're going after those high acuity or high priority patients. So the other thing is, if you look on the next slide, they have it broken down by does the car do ALS and transport onto a BLS unit? Do they pass it off to another paramedic? Or do they downgrade, or do they bring them in for a cardiac arrest potentially? But it's also nice to point out from the scatter plot, it's all over the city. It isn't just in one particular area or another, so it's been.
And not just because Director Reddick is sitting next to me, but what this also illustrates is that 911 gets it right, meaning that we can determine if you classify something as, let's say, an alpha, which is a low priority call, we have good data to suggest that they will not need an ambulance immediately. Similarly, if you look at the percentage of ALS calls that we have, if something is classified as an echo or a delta, the likelihood of advanced life support intervention is important. And it's not, we all work collaboratively here, but I think the challenge is sometimes we need that advanced life support resource if somebody is not breathing well. And I think this is a great opportunity to explore in terms of utilizing paramedics more efficiently. Again, no small credit to Chief Sawyer and her team, including Battalion Chief Hook and the administration. We've worked with the mayor's office to implement Tele911. We are the first jurisdiction in Maryland, so our success or lack thereof will be highly scrutinized according to the state. We've also changed the state law, which says that medical direction can now be provided by doctors. So again, what this, doctors over the phone. So what this is if an ambulance will get to a low acuity call, or a fire suppression unit will get to a low acuity call, and then there's an option to say, look, we can get you the ambulance, but while you're waiting, and we all know that suppression wait time is a big concern, can we get you to talk to a physician? These physicians are board certified in emergency medicine. They're licensed in the state of Maryland, and they can basically weigh in, get patients' prescriptions. They can, right now, we really need, and I know you've heard me talk about this before kind of ad nauseum, we really need alternative transport, but they can get resources. Not only can the physician talk to the patient and stabilize them, but they can also do something on the back end. All of these are followed up by a care navigator. We have a transparent dashboard that is updated with every single call. We are up to about 192 calls to date. We would like to have more as we implement it throughout the entire jurisdiction of Baltimore City. And that number, I want to call your attention to something that's very important here. The TIP number is what's called treatment in place. So every time Tele 911 is engaged, we obviously would not want to continue doing this if that treatment in place number successfully is like 20%. Right? There's no point in training a bunch of people to do this, engaging the service if we're not meeting success. I'm happy to report that since April 1st, that number has maintained rather steady. And we continue to look at that to improve how we can do that. And then we also have a dashboard on the back end, which looks at the service. So that is Tele 911. It is not a solution to the high volume, high utilization at all. It is simply another tool in the toolbox that I think we owe it to our jurisdiction, our patients to explore. And they work with patients with Medicaid. So remember, it's a for-profit company. So they pass the cost along through Medicare and insurance. So there's no direct cost to the fire department. The Tele 911 physicians do their own billing. I want to also transition to, there's a couple of things left over in terms of some of the alternative destinations and cardiac arrest. Happy to report that on the 8th, this has been a long-standing endeavor. We are now approved to do medication-assisted therapy. This is through the Baltimore City Population Health Unit. Now, the state law is that it has to be a mobile integrated health unit, so I can't right now give this to all of my paramedics. But right now it has to be a paramedic unit credentialed to do mobile integrated health. We conducted the training with the Spot Van, Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, University of Maryland School of Medicine, addiction medicine specialists. I am cautious that the number of patients we will induce with buprenorphine was low. The big utility of this is the connection to services, which we talk about a lot. So ideally, once our population health team responds, the real task of this and the benefit, in my opinion, is the ability to link patients to just-in-time services. Director Reddick had mentioned this. We certainly need to continue to drill down on our behavioral health diversion. We did get the Innovation Award. This is an achievement award for our continuing work. I just today met with the GPL, the Government Performance Lab, and there is a whole, I think, a very holistic discussion about how we can recognize patients in crisis. And it's not lost on this group, but patients in crisis often, they're in crisis from the confluence of medical comorbidities, behavioral health, and substance use. So as this program matures and we identify call types suitable for diversion, we will hopefully decrease the number of calls that are ineligible. So I view behavioral health diversion as one step in the larger pool of how we meet the patient where they are and get them the better resources. And that conversation is ongoing. We're very grateful for that help from the GPL lab.
Question, Dr.
Yes,
Larner.
sir.
I have a quick clarification question about the buprenorphine program. Are we able to use that in instances where we are responding to an overdose?
That's correct, yes, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent, thank you.
There are very specific qualifications, according to that state law. But I think, again, I also want to emphasize that if they're not eligible by our criteria, I very much expect this program and those clinicians to reach out, because even if they're not eligible by protocol for EMS, they can contact any one of these substance use resources that we partner with to help get patients on medication-assisted therapy. It's certainly a long discussion. I won't belabor that point, but it is it's very important to look at medication-assisted therapy, I think, as a harm reduction endeavor as a best practice. I'm going to transition to clinical metrics and provide overview. In our last discussion, we talked about streamlining this, so I only want to mention a very high-level overview of what we look at. Certainly, we are mandated anytime chemical restraint is used, we do a 100% review, and those get reported to the state. And we are compliant with the national EMS quality assurance metrics by call review that we do. So if you continue, this is just an example of how we track. And again, offline, I am happy to delve into more detail. For the purposes of this briefing, we identify high priority life safety interventions. So for stroke, for example, we want to make sure the blood glucose is okay. We want to make sure that we're getting patients to the hospital that's most appropriate. I'm happy to report the stroke metrics are quite successful, and that is kind of an exemplary metric of how the fire department does perform quite well. Not all the clinical metrics look like that, but we're getting there. In terms of cardiac arrest, this is another big focus area that involves everyone, as you know. I want to preface cardiac arrest survival by saying that it starts prior to the 911 phone call. This is a community challenge that depends upon availability of defibrillators. It depends upon awareness. And so we are working with our director, Tania Reddick, on Lifelinks. CPR Lifelinks is a CDC-funded initiative that trains 911 call specialists to recognize when patients aren't breathing appropriately. And we also help to transition to Pulse Point. What that does is that if somebody goes into cardiac arrest in the city and there is an automated external defibrillator, it will push an app to their phone and say there's an alert, and it will direct patients or direct citizen responders to the AED. Now, limited utility, obviously, in terms of where the AEDs are. We do participate with the state registry, and hopefully that is a program we can report out once we start those metrics and once we enhance our 911 capacity. Our call taking, as Director Reddick and Acting Deputy Chief Cashin has mentioned, we are consistent with national metrics in terms of how fast we recognize and dispatch. So that is an overview in quarter 4, very similar to quarter 3 as well. I want to call your attention to the CARES metrics. CARES is the Cardiac Arrest Registry to Enhance Survival. And when we started this, we were under 19, 18% for bystander intervention. So although we are not near some of the other counties, I'll call your attention to Prince George's and Howard, which consistently has a bystander CPR rate of above 50%. For the first time, we have been reliably over the 20% intervention rate in quarter 3 and quarter 4. And this is redemonstrated in the next slide. So, overall survival is very difficult. What I want to call your attention to is the Utstein bystander number. Now, this is a little bit incomplete because quarter 4, the CARES metrics are on a different scale, but happy to report that the Utstein bystander number is basically those arrests that are potentially survivable. So to break that down, if somebody's heart stops, it's witnessed, and they are in a shockable rhythm, that is something where all links in the chain are poised to deliver the most appropriate care. And in the highest performing jurisdictions, that metric is around 40, sometimes 50%. Lots of challenges in getting there, but happy to report progress on quarter 3 and quarter 4 for the CARES metrics. I will certainly weigh in with Chief Matz here, but I want to transition back to our Assistant Chief of EMS for the population health.
Thank you. So what I'm going to do now, I'm happy to report that the Population Health Program, we just hit our 1-year anniversary of that program. It was actually implemented 7/11 of 23. And we got some real amazing data. I actually have some updated numbers as well above what we have on here. Just remember that the population health, we're trying to focus on those areas, and we try to start small. We started on opioid harm reduction areas. We also worked on interdisciplinary collaboration with things like Dr. Launer just pointed out, like healthcare on the spot, 988, and some of those different areas. We also are attempting to work with some of our high utilizers. We're also doing a lot of community education on Leave Behind Narcan. As of the creation of these slides, they had just through June, the end of June, they had a couple days to go. They had actually done 336 patient contacts and 9,097 patients and bystanders and family. It's huge that we're able to touch that many people in a year. In addition to that, they were actually successful to 24, that number is actually 25 of our super users or high utilizers, which take up a significant amount of our resources. Population health awareness totals, they've actually had a total of 190 hours in just about 1,200 events. They've given out 327 fentanyl strips, xylazine strips. They linked people with over 227 referrals, and they actually did combination of needle exchange, food, water, wound care. They distributed 898 incidents of that. That's huge when you look at the number of Leave Behind kits that they've actually done. As of these numbers, they had left 8,893 kits. That was just through the end of the month. I'm happy to report as of just last week, that number is 9,556 kits or 19,112 doses of Narcan. What does that impact? That impact is we're starting to see a decline in our incidents and calls for opiate-related overdose. It doesn't mean the calls aren't happening. It just means that we're putting the Narcan out there as it's a lot easier to treat somebody that's withdrawn or wants help than it is somebody that's in cardiac arrest from that. That number, right now, it's tentatively looking like there's been a 28% reduction in those areas, in those type of calls. So that's a really nice number to be able to sit on. We're analyzing it day to day to see what we're finding. A lot of times we're looking at a quarter-mile circumference, 30 days before and 30 days after that we actually distribute the Narcan to see that's impact.
Quick question, if we can go back to that slide. Are we looking at year to date, so I guess from January 1st to July 17th for 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023 as well? Or is the sort of year to date just for 2024? Are we looking at complete years for the?
We're doing a complete, I'm giving you, this is for fiscal year.
Okay.
24 to close a fiscal year, 24 numbers you're getting. I did just a year. I was giving you a heads up. It's been a year since the program's been in, which is just about a fiscal year. They went in 11 days into 10 to July. That's why I was just giving you the updates on those numbers.
I guess what I'm asking is, are we looking at calendar years, complete years for the previous years?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Got it. Thank you. I just want to make sure.
And Chief Matz, I just want to mention one thing about the high utilizers, which is a continued area of focus. You saw on one of the slides that we had several hundred identified and approximately 20-something contacts. And I just want to emphasize that challenge to temper expectations, because we're in a lot of meetings with behavioral and substance use resources where it's all about sharing lists. And I want to assure members of the council that we work with the area hospitals, we work with the health department. Part of the challenge is that the patients are quite sick. And I was working in the emergency department where I responded and saw the same patient 3 times in 2 shifts. And when population health went out the next day, they couldn't find the patient because they were at another hospital. So this is not to say that it is impossible. It's the point that, you know, what can each individual service do to better coordinate care? And I think it does, it's really important to figure out how we can optimize response within our area of responsibility. And that's why 911 should be about connecting patients to the right service, because some of the needs are very complex. But that continues to remain a very large area of our focus, not only in population health, but in my collaborative work with the area hospital systems.
And these are the last couple slides. One of the other facets of our outreach program is our community outreach and education program. That really just got its legs underneath of it. We really started to retool that in the spring of 2024. What they did is they're trying to target 4 major areas that we noticed we're having problems in the city. 1, we're a stroke smart city, so we're doing stroke recognition, we're doing opioid awareness, and we're doing the training at that time, which has been pretty remarkable. They're also doing hands-only CPR, and they're doing AED awareness. Just since they started this program, they were able to train 686 people. One of the other things that's really nice is our program, we have some bilingual people in our program. They were able to outreach Spanish-speaking, 30 of our Spanish-speaking residents. To that end, the trifold handout that we're doing, we're actually making that in multiple languages. Right now we did it in Spanish. We're also doing it to the major top 5 languages in the city of Baltimore. So we've been real happy with this. We still have Artscape and plenty more areas, National Night Out coming on. We're gonna get out and meet people. These numbers are gonna directly impact what Dr. Launer's talking about, the CARES data. We gotta get people on these, you know, most of these cardiac arrests are happening at your home. It could be a family member. These teach the skills for people to bridge until we can get in there and offer life-saving interventions.
You guys are amazing.
Thank you.
Really are. I wanted to say one of the thoughts I had about the buprenorphine piece. Now that we are training folks, I'm sure we have a lot more folks to train. I wonder if there's a new standard that if we administer naloxone, we offer that first buprenorphine dosage and direct them where they can continue should they decide to. I feel like, you know, that's an easy first step that we can help someone on their path to recovery. So if we could explore that, I'm not sure if there are other barriers to consider at the state level or otherwise, but since we now do have that new ability, I would love to see what we can do to automate that step for folks that are dealing with addiction.
I'll start, then I'll let Dr. Launer finish. The Population Health Initiative, what they're doing is they're building and establishing relationships with these people. The trick is, once we have those relationships, when the patients are ready for treatment, we're there, and they have that ability to transition. And then I'll defer to Dr. Lawner from the medical piece.
So Mr. Chair, you've hit on one of the, I think, most evidence-based case scenarios for the use of BUP. The challenge is the patients, obviously, there has to be contemplative patient, right? They have to be willing to do that. And it's not just our jurisdiction. We've reviewed literature from about 4 other jurisdictions, but I think your point is extremely well taken. If this is successful, we may advocate this for a little bit more of an expansion. I think the real battle is going to be with the state, because if you look at the data of just buprenorphine, the challenges are that the inductions are very low, because to meet criteria, patients have to have stable vital signs, they have to want to use it, they have to refuse, transport to the hospital. So that is an ongoing discussion that we will certainly carry forward through the state, and as you mentioned, train more people and continue to engage our partners in substance use harm reduction.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Councilman Cohen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chief and Dr. Lawner. Appreciate the work around the getting medically assisted treatment into the mix, and the push around distributing Narcan and making sure treatment is available. I think one of the things that strikes me is, in dealing with the patient population that you all are dealing with, without solid, stable, safe housing, it's going to be a cycle, right? I mean, we're going to see, I think we've had this conversation a few times, but to me, we can Narcan folks till they're revived, which is great. We can hopefully get them connected to MAT and BOOP and all the, good medically assisted treatment. But if they're still homeless, if they're still have all the other complex social determinants and comorbidities, we're going to just keep on doing it. And so, I know there's been some work in relation to the hospitals and healthcare for the homeless and the city and the state around, and Medicaid around trying to get, permanent, stable, supportive housing for a, relatively small but meaningful number of people. I'm curious sort of what the next iteration of this is, and whether sort of that housing piece is part of it, so that we are breaking the cycle instead of just like medicating people that are dealing with this illness.
Thank you, Councilman Cohen. I will say one thing that, so this is certainly not lost on us. The meeting, I had a meeting at the Government Affairs Division, the University of Maryland School of Medicine, and they received an endowment with their addiction medicine specialist center, and a huge focus is stabilization of housing, because if you don't have a stable house, you're not likely to adhere to medication treatment, and you're less likely to be contemplative. So the challenge that we have to figure out is that whether patients, to your point, accept BUP or not, how do we get them into drop-in centers from 911? And that is a challenge that, quite frankly, no jurisdiction has figured out. But I can tell you it's first and foremost in the priorities, because when we talked about some of the linkages to care, the need for stable housing comes up as need 1, 2, 3. So that is something, as we continue our discussions with the ARPA grants and other submissions, we are continuing to look at that. And I think right now, there is a challenge to drop patients in to places that have experience in this regard. So, and I am not being restrictive with this, but for example, 1001 West Pratt Street has the ability to drop in any time. They have a waiting area, which is somewhat of a stabilization center until that can happen. But I certainly agree with you. It's an area of focus, and one that factors highly into our overall harm reduction strategy.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And, I just think it's, I think all the data and case studies are pretty clear that if someone does not have a stable, safe place to live, very hard to maintain a treatment regimen, very hard to maintain sobriety, just, keep a job. So I just think it is a critical piece, and one that we have to figure out, and not just on the fire department or on EMS or on the hospitals, but on all the agencies. I mean, homeless services and DHCD and the state and all of us together. But I just think like it is so essential that we are dealing with the housing crisis if we're going to really help folks recover and not just sort of be stuck in the cycle. I think that's true.
Thank you, Councilman Cohen. I'll add on a little bit to that because I think you're hitting on a bigger and I think finer point about next steps. Because yes, we could theoretically help someone with the OD, give them naloxone, they recover. We could even take the next step and get them on a BUP if they are willing to accept it. But then the next step is how do we help them stabilize their life, and how do you address all the pressures in their life that may have put them in a situation to begin with. It could be housing, it could be jobs, it could be mental health, it could be everything else. And so I think making sure that we have as clean a handoff as possible to the step thereafter is going to be really important for us, and making sure that we have partners with resources and strong systems that can meet the needs of our very, very complicated patients is going to be the answer. And that's going to be hard work, and it's going to take a little bit of fine tuning. But I do think the work that you guys have been doing with harm reduction and handing out resources and building relationships is exactly the same type of work that helps you do that well. So I think you guys are really ahead of the curve and really, really doing great work here. And I'm excited to see the progress, excited to hear the next step, excited to see the further training and the step thereafter, because I think we are absolutely on the right track. So, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. And I know Councilwoman Ramos had a follow-up for the mayor's office, and do you have a question for them as well?
Just wanted to commend the chief and all of you. We do these quarterly. We've seen the progress, so really do appreciate that, and glad that we can have these conversations. On the housing space, obviously, want to just say ditto. I think that, there was an announcement the other day of the expansion of the program that the universities and hospitals are doing with the city and Medicaid, which is, I think, amazing. And so hopefully we can work with some of the data that you're seeing to really look at what the needs are, which would tell us exactly the number of units that we're going to need with this specialized way of moving forward. So I'm looking forward to digging into a little bit of that. I did have a follow-up with the mayor's office. I had asked earlier, during budget hearings, we had asked for the list of the items that the fire department had asked us, the city, for to address the issues that were brought up in the Stricker Street report. That has not been uploaded to the system yet, and I'm wondering when we will get that.
Those responses are still under review by the mayor's office. So as soon as that review is complete, they'll be submitted to the committee.
Do we know when that's going to be?
Not at this time, but I will reflag it for the executive team.
Right, because I'm still waiting for a lot of stuff on a lot of other things.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll be sure to flag the FY25 hearing requests to make sure that we are continuing to move on those. But I do know that that specific request is still under review.
Thank you.
Can we get maybe a brief update by tomorrow, just the latest and greatest?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I have no further questions. You guys are always amazing and always very thorough in your work. We're really, really, really lucky to have you guys as public servants, and appreciate your leadership, Chief. And yeah, thank you all. This hearing is in recess.